German Shepherd refused to leave. Newborn babies sighed. What happened next was a true miracle. What happened next will absolutely shock you. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. The car rolled to a gentle stop in front of the modest two-story suburban home. For a moment, no one moved. Olivia sat in the passenger seat, her eyes fixed on the tiny bundle nestled in her arms. She couldn't look away from him. Her son, Liam, just 5 days old, with skin like porcelain and eyes that hadn't quite decided their color yet. "We're home," Mark whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he squeezed his wife's shoulder. "All three of us." Olivia nodded, unable to find words. After years of trying, after 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, after doctors who suggested they might never have a child of their own, here was Liam, real and perfect, and finally home. Mark got out first, circling around to carefully open Olivia's door. The February air bit at their cheeks as they made their way up the path to their front door. From inside, they could already hear the excited whining and scratching against the wood. "Sounds like someone else is excited to meet him," Mark said with a nervous smile. Rex, their 3-year-old German Shepherd, had been alone for 3 days while they were at the hospital. Their neighbor had been coming over to feed him and let him out, but they knew he must be going crazy missing them. "Remember what the trainer said," Olivia murmured, instinctively pulling Liam closer to her chest. "Let him smell something of Liam's first, then keep him on the leash for the introduction." Mark nodded, fishing the house keys from his pocket with one hand, while holding the baby blanket they had brought specifically for this purpose in the other. They'd prepared for this moment for weeks, researching, talking to trainers, reading countless articles about introducing dogs to newborns. Rex was well-trained and gentle by nature, but still, he was a large dog with no experience around infants. The door swung open, and there was Rex, tail wagging so hard his entire body shook with it. He let out a soft bark of joy, jumping up slightly before remembering his training and placing all 4 paws back on the ground. "Hey, buddy, we missed you too," Mark laughed, kneeling down to ruffle the dog's fur, while simultaneously keeping him from rushing toward Olivia and the baby. He held out the blanket, letting Rex investigate the new scent. The dog's nose twitched rapidly, taking in the unfamiliar smell. His ears perked forward, head tilting in curiosity. "Good boy," Olivia said softly as she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "This is Liam, Rex. He's part of our family now." Rex sniffed the blanket thoroughly, then looked up at the bundle in Olivia's arms. His tail, which had been wagging enthusiastically, slowed. His posture changed, straightened somehow. The playfulness in his eyes shifted to something more serious, more focused. Mark attached Rex's leash and nodded to Olivia. This was the moment they'd been anxious about. Slowly, carefully, Olivia lowered herself onto the couch, cradling Liam so Rex could see him. "Gentle, Rex," Mark commanded softly, keeping the leash short but not tight. "Gentle." Rex approached with uncharacteristic caution. Gone was the bouncy, exuberant dog who normally greeted them at the door. Instead, he moved with deliberate care, each step measured as he approached the tiny human in Olivia's arms. When he reached them, he stretched his neck forward, nostrils flaring as he took in Liam's scent directly. Olivia and Mark exchanged a glance, both holding their breath. What happened next wasn't anything they'd prepared for. Rex sat down directly beside the couch, his body pressed against it where Liam lay in Olivia's arms. He wasn't looking at them anymore. His gaze was fixed straight ahead, toward the living room entrance, his ears upright and alert. His posture wasn't relaxed. It was vigilant, protective. "Look at that," Mark whispered, smiling with relief. "He's already appointing himself as the bodyguard." Olivia laughed softly. That went better than expected. They spent the next hour settling in, Mark bringing in the bags while Olivia remained on the couch with Liam. Every few minutes, Rex would turn his head to look at the baby, then resume his watchful position. When Olivia stood to carry Liam upstairs to the nursery, Rex was immediately on his feet, following so closely that Olivia had to be careful not to trip over him. "I think someone's a little too interested," she said, glancing down at Rex. "Mark, can you call him back?" "Rex, come," Mark called from downstairs. For the first time since they'd owned him, Rex ignored the command completely. His eyes remained locked on Liam as Olivia carried him up the stairs. She looked back at Mark with surprise. "That's weird," Mark said, climbing the stairs to join them. "Rex, come here, buddy." Again, nothing. The dog padded alongside Olivia into the nursery, a room they'd spent months preparing, painting the walls a soft blue with hand-stenciled clouds, assembling the white wooden crib that had been delivered 3 months early because Olivia couldn't wait. When Olivia gently placed Liam in his crib for the first time, Rex moved to the side of the crib and sat down, his posture once again straight and alert. "I think he likes him," Olivia whispered, smiling down at her son, who had slept through the entire homecoming. Mark wasn't smiling. "I've never seen him ignore commands like that before." Olivia touched his arm. "He's probably just curious. It's a big change for him, too." Mark nodded, but his brow remained furrowed. "Let's see if we can get him to come eat something. I bet Jennifer didn't give him as many treats as we do." "Rex, dinner!" Mark called, using the phrase that never failed to send Rex bounding toward the kitchen. Rex's ears twitched. He glanced briefly toward Mark, then back at the crib. He didn't move. Mark tried again, rattling the food bag. "Rex! Dinner time!" Still, the dog remained stationed by the crib. "Okay, this is definitely strange," Olivia said, her earlier ease giving way to confusion. "Do you think something's wrong with him?" Mark approached Rex, kneeling beside him to check him over. "He seems fine physically. Maybe he's just—" He trailed off, unsure how to explain the dog's unusual behavior. As evening fell, they attempted their newly planned routine, feeding Liam, changing him, swaddling him for bed. Throughout it all, Rex remained a constant presence, watching every move, every touch. When they finally laid Liam down in his crib for the night, Rex settled onto the floor beside it. "Rex, come on," Mark said, patting his leg. "Time for bed, buddy." Rex looked at him, then back at the crib. He lowered his head onto his paws, but made no move to follow Mark. Olivia and Mark exchanged concerned glances. "Should we force him to come?" Olivia asked. Mark thought for a moment. "Let's leave the nursery door open tonight and see what happens. Maybe he'll get bored and join us later." But as they prepared for bed themselves, both exhausted from the days at the hospital and the emotional journey home, they checked the nursery one last time to find Rex in exactly the same position, eyes open, watching the crib where Liam slept peacefully. "I've never seen him like this," Olivia whispered as they retreated to their bedroom across the hall. "Me neither," Mark admitted. "But I guess as long as he's not being aggressive, it's okay." Neither of them slept well that first night, both constantly waking to check the baby monitor and peer into the nursery. Each time, they found the same scene. Rex maintaining his vigilant position by the crib, sometimes sitting up, sometimes lying down, but always awake, always watching. By morning, Olivia's concern had grown. "He hasn't eaten, he hasn't gone out to use the bathroom. This isn't normal, Mark." Mark nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I'll call the vet when they open. Maybe there's something wrong we can't see." After Liam's morning feeding, Mark managed to coax Rex outside for a quick bathroom break, but the dog raced back to the door immediately after, whining and scratching until he was let back in. He made a beeline for the nursery, resuming his post by the crib. The vet, when Mark reached him by phone, was puzzled but not alarmed. "Dogs can be very sensitive to changes in the household," Dr. Harris explained, "and German Shepherds are particularly protective by nature. As long as he's not showing any signs of aggression toward the baby, I wouldn't worry too much. Try to maintain as much of his regular routine as possible, and he'll probably adjust within a few days." But Rex didn't adjust. Throughout the day, he remained fixated on Liam, refusing to leave the nursery for more than a few minutes at a time. He would gulp down food if brought to him, but wouldn't stay in the kitchen to eat it properly. Every attempt to keep him downstairs was met with anxious whining and pacing until he was allowed back to Liam's side. By late afternoon, both Olivia and Mark were exhausted and increasingly concerned. "This can't go on," Olivia said, watching as Rex once again took up his position by the crib where Liam was napping. "It's not healthy for him." Mark nodded, his face tight with worry. "I'll try one more thing." He went to the garage and returned with Rex's favorite toy, a plush, squeaky duck that normally sent him into ecstatic play mode. Mark squeaked it loudly just outside the nursery door. Rex's head whipped around, his eyes locking onto the toy. For a moment, his tail gave a tentative wag. Mark squeaked it again, backing slowly down the hallway. Rex took a step toward the door, then stopped. He looked back at the crib, then at the toy, visibly torn. Mark squeaked the duck again, shaking it enticingly. Rex let out a soft whine, took another step toward Mark, then turned back to the crib. His decision made, he returned to his post, lying down with his back to Mark and the toy. "I don't believe it," Mark said, lowering the duck. "Nothing gets between Rex and this stupid duck. Nothing." As night fell again, they prepared for a repeat of the previous night's strange vigil. But just as Olivia was finishing Liam's bedtime feeding, something changed. Rex, who had been lying quietly in the corner of the nursery, suddenly stood up. His ears pricked forward, his body tense. He moved closer to the crib, his head tilted slightly as if listening for something. "What is it, boy?" Mark asked, watching the dog's unusual behavior. Rex didn't respond. His focus was entirely on the crib. Then, to their shock, he let out a low, rumbling growl. Olivia instinctively clutched Liam closer to her chest. "Mark!" she hissed, panic flaring in her eyes. Mark moved quickly to Rex's side, prepared to grab his collar if necessary. But the dog wasn't looking at Liam. He was staring intently at the corner of the nursery near the window. The growl came again, not aggressive or threatening, but clearly a warning. "What's he growling at?" Olivia whispered, her heart pounding as she looked around the peaceful nursery. There was nothing there, just the rocking chair, the changing table, the dresser they had painted to match the crib. Mark shook his head, confused. "I don't know. Rex, what is it? What do you see?" Rex continued to stare at the empty corner, his growl subsiding, but his body remaining tense and alert. "There's nothing there," Olivia said, her voice shaky. "Why is he acting like this?" Mark moved to the corner, checking behind the rocking chair, looking out the window into the darkening yard. "Nothing? There's nothing here?" Olivia laughed nervously, trying to break the tension. "Maybe he's just jealous and trying to scare us." Mark forced a smile. "Yeah, maybe. Or maybe he's just being weird because everything's changed." Neither of them believed their own explanations, but neither wanted to voice the strange feeling that had settled over the room. That night, Olivia woke suddenly at 3 a.m. For a moment, she wasn't sure what had disturbed her sleep, then she heard it again. A soft, persistent whining coming through the baby monitor. She nudged Mark awake. "Listen," she whispered. They both sat up, straining to hear. Through the monitor, they could hear Rex whining, not loudly, but insistently. Then came a sound that made both of them jump out of bed immediately, the light scratching of paws against the side of the crib. They rushed into the nursery to find Rex standing on his hind legs, front paws resting on the edge of the crib. He was gently nudging at the blankets covering Liam, whining with increasing urgency. "Rex, no!" Mark said sharply, pulling the dog away. "Down!" But as Rex was forced back, Olivia gasped. Liam's normally pink face looked pale in the dim nightlight. She reached into the crib, her hands shaking, and lifted him. "He's so cold," she said, panic rising in her voice as she pressed her cheek to his forehead. "Mark, he feels cold." Mark touched Liam's tiny hand. It was cool to the touch, too cool. The baby's breathing seemed shallow, his tiny chest barely moving. "Something's wrong," Olivia said, her voice rising. "Call 911, Mark." As Mark fumbled for his phone, Rex continued to whine, circling anxiously around Olivia's legs as she clutched Liam to her chest, trying to warm him with her own body heat. "My baby, he's only 5 days old. Something's wrong," Olivia stammered when the emergency operator answered. "He's cold, and his breathing doesn't seem right." The operator's calm voice guided them through the next terrifying minutes, checking Liam's airway, monitoring his breathing, keeping him warm while they waited for the ambulance. Through it all, Rex remained agitated, whining and pacing, his eyes never leaving the baby. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly assessed Liam and decided to transport him to the hospital immediately. "His temperature is well below normal," the female paramedic explained as they prepared to leave. "It's good you found him when you did." In the chaos that followed, the rush drive to the hospital, the frantic wait as doctors examined Liam, the technical medical terms that washed over them in a blur of fear, one thought kept returning to both Olivia and Mark. Rex had known. Somehow, the dog had sensed something was wrong with Liam before they had any idea. It wasn't until nearly dawn, as they sat shell-shocked in the pediatric waiting room, that the doctor finally approached them with news. "Your son has a rare form of infant sleep apnea," Dr. Patterson explained gently. "It caused his breathing to become dangerously shallow, which led to the drop in body temperature. If you hadn't found him when you did..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. "Will he be okay?" Olivia asked, her voice barely audible. The doctor nodded. "We've stabilized him and started him on monitoring equipment. He'll need to stay here for a few days while we regulate his breathing and run some more tests. But I believe he'll make a full recovery." Mark's hand found Olivia's, squeezing tightly. "Our dog," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Our dog knew something was wrong. He woke us up." Dr. Patterson looked surprised. "Your dog? What happened?" Olivia explained Rex's strange behavior since they'd brought Liam home. The refusal to leave the crib, the constant vigilance, and finally, the urgent whining that had woken them. The doctor's eyebrows raised. "That's remarkable. There have been cases of dogs detecting medical conditions, seizures, low blood sugar, even certain cancers. But I've never personally encountered one that could detect sleep apnea." "He knew," Olivia whispered, tears filling her eyes. Rex knew Liam was in danger. When they were finally allowed to see Liam, now connected to monitors and with a tiny oxygen tube beneath his nose, both parents broke down. The sight of their newborn son, so small and vulnerable amid the medical equipment, was almost too much to bear. "He saved him," Mark said quietly as they watched Liam's now steady breathing. "If Rex hadn't woken us up..." Olivia nodded, unable to speak through her tears. When they finally returned home the next morning to shower and change clothes before heading back to the hospital, they found Rex still in the nursery. He was lying beside the empty crib, head on his paws, the picture of dejection. At the sight of them, he jumped up, racing to sniff their hands and clothes, clearly searching for Liam's scent. "He's okay, buddy," Mark said, kneeling to embrace the dog. "Liam's going to be okay, thanks to you." Rex whined softly, looking past them toward the door, as if expecting to see the baby. "Liam's at the hospital," Olivia explained, running her hands through Rex's fur. "He's getting better. You saved him, Rex. You saved our little boy." As if understanding, Rex's tail gave a tentative wag, but his eyes remained sad, and he followed them around the house like a shadow as they gathered what they needed before returning to the hospital. "Should we take him to the neighbors?" Mark asked as they prepared to leave again. "He seems so sad." Olivia looked at Rex, at the intelligence and concern in his brown eyes, and shook her head. "Number. When Liam comes home, Rex needs to be here. I think they need each other." 3 days later, Liam was finally cleared to come home. The doctors had him on a special monitor that would alert them if his breathing became irregular again, and they'd been thoroughly trained on what signs to watch for. Still, as Mark carried the car seat from the hospital entrance to their waiting car, both parents felt the weight of fear and responsibility pressing down on them. "He looks so tiny in that thing," Olivia said, tucking the blanket more securely around Liam as Mark secured the car seat. "But stronger," Mark replied, gently touching his son's cheek. "Don't you think he looks stronger?" Olivia nodded, though she wasn't sure if Liam really looked different or if it was just their desperate hope making them see improvement. The drive home was tense, both of them glancing constantly at the rearview mirror to check on their sleeping baby. When they pulled into the driveway, they could see Rex's face in the living room window. The moment they stepped out of the car, his barking erupted from inside the house. Not aggressive barking, but the excited, almost frantic sound of a dog who couldn't contain his emotions. "Someone's happy we're back," Mark said, managing a small smile as he carefully lifted the car seat. The moment they opened the front door, Rex was there, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. But unlike their previous homecoming, his eyes weren't on them. They were fixed firmly on the car seat and the tiny bundle inside it. "Yes, Rex, Liam's home," Olivia said softly, kneeling to let the dog sniff at the edge of the car seat. "He's okay now?" Rex's inspection was thorough, his nose moving carefully over every inch of the car seat he could reach, inhaling Liam's scent mixed with the unfamiliar smells of the hospital. When he seemed satisfied, he backed up slightly, sitting down but keeping his eyes on Liam. "I think he wants to make sure we're taking good care of his baby," Mark said, only half joking. They settled Liam into his crib upstairs, the new monitoring equipment beeping softly beside him. Without hesitation, Rex resumed his position by the crib, lying down with his head on his paws, but his eyes alert and watchful. This time, neither Olivia nor Mark tried to coax him away. They both understood now that Rex's behavior wasn't just strange, It was potentially life-saving. That night, they took turns staying awake, watching both the monitor and their son. But no matter which of them was on duty, Rex remained a constant presence. He never slept more than a few minutes at a time, always jerking awake to check on Liam before allowing himself to doze again. By morning, a new routine had established itself. Whenever Liam was in his crib, Rex was beside it. When Olivia carried Liam downstairs to feed him in the rocking chair, Rex followed, settling at her feet. When Mark gave Liam his bath in the small plastic tub on the kitchen counter, Rex stood nearby, observing every movement with intense focus. The only time Rex would willingly leave Liam's side was for quick bathroom breaks in the backyard, and even then, he would race through his business to get back inside as quickly as possible. "It's like having a second baby monitor," Olivia remarked a week later, as she folded laundry in the nursery while Liam napped. Rex, as always, was stationed by the crib. Except, this one has fur and never needs new batteries. Mark leaned against the doorframe, watching them. "I've been reading about this online. There are cases of dogs that can detect seizures before they happen, or alert diabetics when their blood sugar drops. There's something called medical alert dogs. They're specially trained to help people with conditions like Liam's." Olivia looked up, intrigued. "Trained?" "Rex is doing this naturally." "That's what's so amazing," Mark said, his voice soft with wonder. "Most dogs have to be trained for months, even years. Rex just knew somehow." As the weeks passed, they settled into their new normal. Liam grew stronger, his episodes of troubled breathing becoming less frequent. The pediatrician was cautiously optimistic that he might outgrow the condition entirely. But, through it all, Rex maintained his self-appointed role as guardian. He would sleep only when Liam slept, and even then, the slightest change in the baby's breathing would bring him instantly alert. What they couldn't explain, what made them exchange worried glances when they thought the other wasn't looking, was that Rex's vigilance hadn't decreased even as Liam's condition improved. If anything, the dog seemed more protective, more alert with each passing day. "Do you think he still senses something wrong?" Olivia whispered one night as they watched Rex sleeping beside the crib, his ears twitching at every tiny sound Liam made. Mark shook his head. "The doctor says Liam's doing great. The monitor hasn't gone off in over a week." "Then why is Rex still acting like this? It's been a month, Mark. He barely eats unless we bring his food to the nursery. He's losing weight." It was true. Rex's once muscular frame had become noticeably leaner, his ribs just beginning to show beneath his thick coat. The constant vigilance was taking a physical toll on him. "Maybe we should ask Dr. Harris to check him again," Mark suggested, referring to their veterinarian. There could be something wrong with Rex that we're missing. The next day, Mark took Rex to the vet, while Olivia stayed home with Liam. The separation was clearly stressful for the dog. He whined and pulled at the leash all the way to the car, looking back at the house with anxious eyes. At the vet's office, he was so agitated that Dr. Harris had difficulty examining him. Physically, he seems generally healthy, though, yes, he has lost some weight, Dr. Harris reported after a thorough examination. But his anxiety level is concerning. "You say this started when you brought your son home?" Mark nodded, explaining Rex's behavior in detail. The constant watchfulness, the refusal to leave Liam, the night he'd alerted them to Liam's breathing troubles. Dr. Harris listened thoughtfully. "It's not unheard of for dogs to form strong protective bonds with infants in their household, but this level of attachment is unusual. Has Rex had any history of anxiety before this?" "Never," Mark said firmly. "He's always been confident, outgoing. The trainer we worked with called him one of the most balanced dogs she'd ever seen." The vet made some notes in Rex's file. "I'm going to prescribe a mild anti-anxiety medication. It won't sedate him. It will just take the edge off his stress, and I'd suggest gradually working on separation, even just getting him to stay in a different room from your son for short periods, rewarding him for calm behavior." Mark took the prescription, but both he and Olivia were hesitant to use it. Rex's behavior might be unusual, but it had already saved Liam's life once. What if the medication dulled whatever sense had allowed him to detect the problem? Instead, they tried the behavioral approach, using Rex's favorite treats to reward him for staying at the nursery door, rather than directly beside the crib. Progress was painfully slow. The furthest they could get him to move from Liam was the hallway outside the nursery, and even then, his body remained tense, his eyes fixed on the doorway, ready to rush back in at the slightest sound. Then came the night that changed everything. Liam was 2 months old now, his sleep periods gradually lengthening. That evening, as Olivia nursed him before bed, she noticed he felt slightly warm. "Do you think he has a fever?" she asked Mark, who was sorting laundry nearby. Mark felt Liam's forehead. "Maybe a slight one. The pediatrician said it's common for babies to run a little warm when they're teething." "Teething? He's too young for that, isn't he?" "Some babies start early," Mark said with a shrug. "My mom always said I was drooling by 2 months." Olivia wasn't convinced, but Liam wasn't acting fussy or sick. He nursed normally and fell asleep easily when she placed him in his crib. Rex, as always, took up his position beside it. Around 3 a.m., Olivia woke suddenly, her heart pounding for no apparent reason. The baby monitor showed the nursery in grainy infrared. Liam's crib, the rocking chair, the dresser. Everything looked normal, except it didn't. Something was missing. "Rex," she whispered, sitting upright. "I don't see Rex." Mark stirred beside her. Rex isn't by the crib," Olivia said, already getting out of bed. "He's never away from the crib at night." The moment she stepped into the hallway, she heard it, a soft whining coming from the nursery, not from beside the crib, but from across the room, near the window. She rushed in, Mark now fully awake and following close behind. Rex was standing at the nursery window, his front paws on the windowsill, whining softly but insistently as he stared out into the darkness. When he heard them enter, he turned his head briefly, then looked back outside, his whine increasing in urgency. "What is it, boy?" Mark asked, moving to the window. "What do you see out there?" He peered out into the backyard, dimly lit by the motion sensor light near the patio. Nothing seemed out of place. The swing set they'd bought in hopeful anticipation during Olivia's pregnancy, the small garden shed, the wooden fence surrounding the property. "There's nothing out there," he said, turning back to Olivia, who was already checking on Liam. "He's burning up," she said, her voice tight with fear as she lifted the baby from his crib. "Mark, he's really hot." Mark was at her side instantly, pressing his hand to Liam's forehead. He was right. The baby's skin was frighteningly hot to the touch, his cheeks flushed red. "Get the thermometer," he said, taking Liam into his arms. The baby's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with fever. The temperature reading confirmed their fears. 103.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Far too high for a 2-month-old. "We need to go to the hospital," Olivia said, already reaching for her phone to call the pediatrician's emergency line. "Now." As Mark quickly dressed Liam for the trip, Rex abandoned his post at the window. He circled them anxiously, whining and nudging at Liam with his nose. But there was something different about his behavior this time. He kept returning to the window, looking out, then back at them, as if trying to communicate something they couldn't understand. "What's wrong with him?" Olivia asked as she threw essential items into a bag. "Why does he keep going to the window?" Mark shook his head, focused on bundling Liam into a light blanket. "I don't know, but we need to go." The pediatrician's office had advised them to bring Liam to the emergency room immediately. A fever that high in such a young infant could indicate a serious infection. As they hurried down the stairs, Rex raced ahead of them, positioning himself by the front door. But instead of waiting to be let out, he stood with his back to the door, facing them, his posture rigid and alert. "We don't have time for games, Rex," Mark said tensely, trying to move past the dog with Liam in his arms. Rex didn't budge. He let out a single sharp bark, something he rarely did inside the house. "Rex, move!" Olivia said, her voice breaking with fear and frustration. The dog held his ground, staring at them with intense, meaningful eyes. Mark was about to physically move him aside when a sound from outside froze them all in place, the distinct crunch of footsteps on gravel just outside their front door. Rex's growl was instantaneous and unmistakable, low, warning, dangerous. Mark and Olivia exchanged a wide-eyed look of understanding. Someone was outside their house. At 3:30 in the morning, Mark carefully passed Liam to Olivia, motioning for her to back up toward the kitchen. He reached for his phone to call 911, but before he could dial, there was another sound, the subtle, metallic scrape of something being inserted into their front door lock. Rex's growl deepened, the hair along his spine rising as he positioned himself between the door and his family. "Upstairs," Mark whispered urgently to Olivia. "Lock yourself in the bathroom. I'll call 911. Olivia clutched Liam to her chest, her face pale with terror as she backed toward the stairs. But before she could reach them, a new sound cut through the tense silence, the distinct crack of breaking glass from the kitchen at the back of the house. "There's someone else at the back door," she gasped, freezing in place. Mark's mind raced with horrifying clarity. This wasn't a random break-in. There were multiple people targeting their home, coordinating their entry, and they had a critically ill infant who needed immediate medical attention. Rex seemed to understand the dire situation. He looked from the front door to Mark, then to Olivia and Liam, making a split-second decision that none of them expected. He abandoned his post at the front door and raced to Olivia's side, herding her not toward the stairs, but toward the small half-bathroom under the staircase. "Go with him," Mark urged, already dialing 911, as he moved to grab the baseball bat he kept in the coat closet. "Lock the door." Olivia, running on pure adrenaline and maternal instinct, followed Rex into the tiny bathroom, clutching Liam with one arm while locking the door with the other. The space was barely large enough for her to sit on the closed toilet seat with Liam in her arms. Rex stood guard at the door, his body tense, a continuous low growl rumbling from his chest. Outside, she could hear Mark's voice, tense but controlled, giving their address to the 911 operator. Then came the sound that made her blood run cold, the distinct crack of the back door giving way, followed by heavy footsteps entering their kitchen. Huddled in the tiny bathroom, Olivia pressed Liam against her chest, trying to both comfort him and keep him quiet despite his fever. Every noise from outside the door sent fresh waves of terror through her body. Rex remained alert, his body positioned protectively between her and the door, a continuous low growl rumbling in his throat. "Please hurry," she whispered, praying the police would arrive quickly. Liam stirred in her arms, letting out a small whimper. His skin burned against hers, his tiny face flushed with fever. Outside, she could hear Mark's voice, firm and steady despite the situation. "I have a weapon, and I've called the police," he shouted. "They're on their way right now. Get out of my house." There was a tense silence, then the sound of movement, not retreating, but advancing further into the house. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she heard multiple sets of footsteps. How many were there? "Upstairs," a male voice whispered harshly. "Check upstairs." Rex's growl deepened at the unfamiliar voice. Olivia placed a trembling hand on his back, silently urging him to stay quiet. If they were discovered in this tiny space with no escape route? A loud crash from the living room made her jump, the sound of furniture being overturned, followed by a grunt of pain that she recognized as Mark's voice. Tears sprang to her eyes. Mark was fighting them, trying to keep them away from her and Liam. The footsteps continued, moving toward the stairs. They were going to search the bedrooms, looking for exactly what she had, the baby. Why else would they specifically target the upstairs? A cold realization washed over her. This wasn't a random break-in. These people were after Liam. Rex seemed to sense her rising panic. He turned his head briefly, licking her hand once before returning his attention to the door. The gesture, so simple and familiar, somehow calmed her racing heart. They weren't alone. They had Rex. Liam began to fuss more insistently, his fever making him uncomfortable. Olivia rocked him gently, pressing her lips to his forehead in a silent plea for quiet. Every second that passed was both a victory and a torment. They hadn't been discovered yet, but Liam needed medical attention urgently. Suddenly, the house was filled with new sounds, shouting, the bang of the front door hitting the wall, authoritative voices identifying themselves as police. Relief surged through Olivia, making her lightheaded. They were saved, but the nightmare wasn't over. "She's in here somewhere," an unfamiliar voice shouted from far too close, right outside in the hallway. "Find the baby before they do." The bathroom doorknob rattled violently. Olivia bit back a scream, clutching Liam closer. Rex's reaction was instant and fierce. His growl exploded into barking, his body tensed as if ready to attack the moment the door opened. The rattling stopped. For a moment, there was silence from the other side. Then a tremendous crash as something, or someone, slammed against the door. The cheap lock shuddered in its frame. Rex's barking became frenzied, his body coiled with protective fury. Another crash against the door, and Olivia could see the frame beginning to splinter. Just as the third crash came, she heard new shouts, louder, closer. the unmistakable sound of a scuffle, followed by the authoritative voice of a police officer. "On the ground! Now!" The bathroom door remained closed, the lock hanging on despite the assault. Olivia sat frozen, unsure if it was truly over. Rex had stopped barking, but remained on high alert, his eyes fixed on the door. "Olivia?" Mark's voice called from the other side, shaky but wonderfully blessedly alive. "Olivia, it's okay. The police are here. You can come out." Still, she hesitated, her arms tightening around Liam. "Mark? Is it really safe?" "Yes, they've got them. It's over." With trembling fingers, she unlocked the door. It swung open to reveal Mark, a cut above his eye bleeding freely, but otherwise intact. Behind him stood 2 police officers, their presence flooding her with relief so profound she nearly collapsed. "My baby," she managed to say, her voice breaking. "He has a high fever. We were trying to take him to the hospital when—" "There's an ambulance on the way," one of the officers assured her. "They should be here any minute." In the chaotic hour that followed, Olivia pieced together what had happened. 3 men had attempted to break in, one through the front door, one through the back, and a third who had been watching from outside, possibly as a lookout. The police had arrived just in time, catching 2 of the intruders inside the house. The third had fled, but was apprehended 2 blocks away. What they couldn't explain, what made no sense at all, was why these men had targeted their home, why they had been so intent on finding Liam. "The one we caught in the upstairs hallway was carrying zip ties and a blanket," the detective told them grimly as they sat in the emergency room waiting for news about Liam. "We believe they may have been planning to take your son." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. "Take him? But why? We're not wealthy. We don't have enemies." The detective's expression was grave. "We're investigating all possibilities. For now, we'll have an officer stationed outside your son's hospital room." Mark, his cut now bandaged, wrapped an arm around Olivia's shoulders. "What about Rex? Is he okay?" They had left the dog at home with a neighbor who had come over after hearing the commotion. The officers had been impressed by Rex's protective behavior, noting that the bathroom door might not have held, if not for his fierce barking and visible willingness to attack anyone who entered. "He seemed fine, just very agitated about being separated from you," the detective said. "That's quite a dog you have there." Olivia and Mark exchanged a look, both thinking the same thing. Rex had known. Somehow he had sensed not just Liam's fever, but the danger lurking outside their home. When he'd stood at the nursery window, whining and staring into the darkness, he hadn't been acting strangely. He'd been warning them. The fever that had seemed like such a crisis had actually saved them all by forcing them to be awake and alert when the intruders came. Liam was diagnosed with a serious ear infection, requiring a 2-day stay in the hospital. During this time, Mark installed a security system at their home. Cameras, motion sensors, reinforced locks. The police had no updates about the motive behind the break-in, though they assured the couple that all 3 men remained in custody. When they finally brought Liam home again, Rex's reaction was even more intense than before. He inspected every inch of the house before allowing Liam's carrier to be set down, sniffing doorways, windows, corners, anywhere an intruder might enter or hide. "He's checking for danger," Mark observed quietly as they watched Rex's methodical patrol. "He knows what happened." The night of their return, Mark woke to find Rex missing from his usual spot beside Liam's crib. A spike of fear shot through him until he found the dog sitting alertly by the nursery window, exactly as he had been on the night of the break-in. Mark joined him, peering out into the darkness. "What is it, boy? What do you see out there?" Rex whined softly, his eyes fixed on something in the darkened yard. Mark flipped on the outside light, illuminating the backyard. Nothing seemed out of place, yet Rex remained tense, unconvinced. The night of their return, Mark woke to find Rex missing from his usual spot beside Liam's crib. A spike of fear shot through him until he found the dog sitting alertly by the nursery window, exactly as he had been on the night of the break-in. Mark joined him, peering out into the darkness. "What is it, boy? What do you see out there?" Rex whined softly, his eyes fixed on something in the darkened yard. Mark flipped on the outside light, illuminating the backyard. Nothing seemed out of place, yet Rex remained tense, unconvinced. Mark didn't dismiss the dog's concern this time. Instead, he picked up his phone and called the non-emergency police line, requesting a patrol car to drive by their house. The dispatcher, hearing about the recent break-in, was happy to oblige. 20 minutes later, an officer called to report that they had spotted someone loitering in the wooded area behind several houses on the block, right where Rex had been staring. The man had fled when approached, and they were unable to apprehend him, but the description matched none of the 3 men already in custody. There was someone else involved, Mark told Olivia the next morning, his face tense with worry. Someone who's still out there. Olivia looked down at Liam, sleeping peacefully in her arms, then at Rex, who had barely left their side since their return. We can't live like this, Mark. Jumping at shadows, afraid in our own home. We won't have to, Mark said, determination hardening his voice. I've been thinking, remember what the doctor said about Rex, that he might have a natural ability to detect Liam's breathing problems? Olivia nodded. There are programs that train dogs like Rex to become official service dogs. Medical alert dogs, they're called. If we got Rex certified, he could legally be with Liam everywhere. At daycare when you go back to work, at school when he's older, everywhere. You think his training would help with this other situation too? The security issue? Mark nodded. Many service dogs are cross-trained. Rex already has the natural instinct to protect Liam and to alert us to danger. With professional training, he could become even more effective. It wasn't a perfect solution to their security concerns, but it was a start. After researching several programs, they found a trainer who specialized in medical alert dogs. Patricia Wilson had 20 years of experience and was impressed by Rex's natural abilities. Most dogs need to be specifically selected for this work based on temperament tests, she explained during her first visit to their home. The fact that Rex showed these abilities spontaneously is remarkable. She observed Rex's behavior around Liam, noting his attentiveness and the way he responded to even subtle changes in the baby's breathing or temperature. He's a natural, she said with undisguised admiration. With proper training, he could become an exceptional service dog. The training would be intensive, several months of daily work, some of it at Patricia's facility, some at home. The cost was significant, but Mark and Olivia didn't hesitate. If it meant keeping Liam safe, both medically and physically, no price was too high. They started the following week. Each morning, Mark would take Rex to Patricia's training center, where he worked on specific medical alert responses. How to notify adults clearly when Liam's breathing changed, how to respond if his temperature rose too high. In the afternoons, Patricia came to their home to work with Rex in his natural environment, teaching him to discriminate between normal visitors and potential threats. The goal isn't to make him aggressive, she explained as she worked with Rex. It's to refine his natural protective instincts and give him clear ways to communicate with you when he senses something wrong. Throughout this training period, their lives gradually began to stabilize. The security system Mark had installed gave them peace of mind, and the regular police patrols of their neighborhood continued. There had been no further sightings of suspicious individuals near their home, and the investigation into the break-in continued, though with few new leads. One evening, as Mark and Olivia sat on the couch watching Rex perform one of his new alert behaviors, placing a paw firmly on Mark's knee, then looking toward the front door, Mark's phone rang. It was Detective Ramirez who had been handling their case. "We've got a lead," he said without preamble. "One of the men we arrested has agreed to talk in exchange for consideration during sentencing." Mark put the phone on speaker so Olivia could hear. "According to his statement, they were hired by someone to abduct your son," the detective continued, his voice grave. "He claims they didn't know why, just that they were offered a significant amount of money to bring the baby to a specific location." Olivia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Who would do such a thing? Who hired them? He doesn't know the person's real name, says they only communicated through encrypted messages and a voice modifier. But he did provide one detail that might help. The person who hired them knew specific details about your son's medical condition. Very specific details. Mark and Olivia exchanged a horrified glance. "Like what?" Mark asked, though he already feared the answer. "Like the fact that your son has a rare form of infant sleep apnea, and that he had been hospitalized for it." The implications were chilling. Only a handful of people had access to that information. The hospital staff, the specialists who had diagnosed Liam, perhaps a few close family members they had confided in. "We're looking into everyone who had access to your son's medical records," Detective Ramirez assured them. "We have already started interviewing hospital staff. I wanted you to know that we're making progress." After the call ended, Olivia and Mark sat in stunned silence. The danger to Liam was even more specific and calculated than they had feared. Someone with medical knowledge had targeted their baby deliberately. "Why?" Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why would anyone want to take our baby?" Mark had no answer. He pulled her close, watching as Rex moved to sit directly in front of them, his intelligent eyes moving between their faces as if he understood every word they had said. The weeks that followed were tense but productive. Rex's training progressed remarkably well. Patricia often commented that he seemed to understand concepts faster than any dog she'd worked with before. "It's almost like he knows what's at stake," she remarked one afternoon, watching Rex practice his alert behaviors. "Like he understands his job is to protect Liam." Mark nodded, absently running his hand along Rex's back. "Sometimes I think he's smarter than we are. He knew there was danger outside our house before we had any idea." The investigation continued as well, though at a frustratingly slow pace. Detective Ramirez called regularly with updates, but none of them brought the answers they desperately needed. The hospital staff had all been cleared. Medical records had been audited for unauthorized access, revealing nothing suspicious. The three men arrested during the break-in maintained they didn't know the identity of the person who had hired them, having been contacted through an anonymous online platform. As Liam reached his 4-month milestone, some measure of normalcy returned to their lives. His sleep apnea episodes had become less frequent, though they hadn't disappeared entirely. The pediatrician was optimistic about his progress, suggesting that, with continued monitoring, he might completely outgrow the condition by his first birthday. Rex was now officially in the final phase of his training. He wore a service dog vest when they went out in public, and people often commented on his exceptional focus and discipline. He had become a local celebrity of sorts, the German shepherd who had saved a baby from both medical crisis and attempted abduction. "I feel safer with him around," Olivia confessed to Mark one evening as they watched Rex sleeping beside Liam's crib, his usual position. "Even with all the security measures, it's Rex that helps me sleep at night." Mark understood completely. There was something deeply reassuring about Rex's unwavering vigilance, his absolute dedication to Liam's safety. But their sense of security was shattered one autumn evening when Liam was nearly 6 months old. It had been a normal day. Mark had gone back to work at the architectural firm a month earlier, his paternity leave finally exhausted. Olivia was still at home with Liam, planning to return to her job as a high school counselor after his first birthday. The evening routine was well established: dinner together as a family, playtime with Liam on the living room floor, bath time, then bedtime for the baby, while Mark and Olivia enjoyed a quiet hour or two together before turning in themselves. That night, as Mark cleaned up from dinner, Olivia took Liam upstairs for his bath. Rex followed, as he always did, settling on the bathroom mat to watch the proceedings with his usual attentiveness. "Someone's getting sleepy," Olivia cooed as she lifted Liam from the small plastic tub, wrapping him in a hooded towel. His eyelids were already drooping, his tiny body relaxing against her. She carried him to the nursery, laying him on the changing table to dress him in his pajamas. It was as she was snapping up the final buttons that she noticed Rex's odd behavior. He wasn't in his usual spot by the crib. Instead, he stood at the window again, his body rigid with tension, a low growl building in his throat. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "Rex? What is it, boy?" The dog didn't respond to her voice. His attention was completely focused on something outside the window. The growl deepened, raising the hair on the back of Olivia's neck. She quickly finished dressing Liam, then picked him up, holding him close as she cautiously approached the window. Rex moved slightly to make room for her, but didn't break his intense stare. The backyard was dark, illuminated only by the security light near the patio. At first she saw nothing unusual, just the familiar shapes of their yard in the dim light. Then, a movement caught her eye. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, moving along the fence line. "Mark!" she called, her voice tight with fear. "Mark, come up here!" She heard his footsteps on the stairs. Then he was beside her, following her gaze out the window. "There," she whispered, pointing, "by the fence." Mark squinted, then his body tensed as he spotted it too. The unmistakable silhouette of a person, trying to stay hidden in the shadows of their yard. "Call 911, he said quietly, reaching for his phone. "I'll activate the security system alarm." But before either of them could act, Rex's behavior changed dramatically. The growl exploded into frenzied barking, his body vibrating with aggression. Olivia gasped as she saw why. The figure was now moving toward the house, approaching the back door with purposeful strides. Mark hit the panic button on their security system, setting off a piercing alarm. The shadowy figure froze, then turned and sprinted toward the fence. Within seconds, they had disappeared over it, vanishing into the wooded area beyond their property. The police arrived within minutes, responding to both their call and the security system alert. They searched the yard and surrounding area thoroughly, but found no trace of the intruder. The only evidence that someone had been there at all were footprints in the soft soil beneath the nursery window, proof that someone had been standing there, looking in at them. "It's happening again," Olivia said later that night, after the police had gone and Liam was asleep in his crib. They sat at the kitchen table, both too wired with adrenaline to even think about sleep. "They're still after him." Mark ran his hands through his hair, his face lined with exhaustion and worry. But why? What would anyone want with our baby? The question had haunted them for months now, with no answers in sight. The next morning, Detective Ramirez arrived at their door. His expression was grim as he settled at their kitchen table, declining the coffee Olivia offered. "We got a hit on the security camera footage from last night," he said without preamble. "The quality isn't great, but we were able to enhance it enough to run it through facial recognition." Olivia clutched Mark's hand under the table, both dreading and needing to know who was stalking their family. "The match isn't 100% certain," the detective continued, "but we believe the person in your yard last night was Janet Whelan." The name meant nothing to either of them. They exchanged blank looks before turning back to the detective. "Should we know who that is?" Mark asked. Detective Ramirez sighed. "No, you wouldn't. She was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital until about 8 months ago." Olivia's breath caught. "That's where Liam was born." The detective nodded. "Ms. Whelan worked in the maternity ward for 15 years. She was let go just before your son was born, after several concerning incidents. Nothing that could be proven definitively, but there were suspicions that she had become overly attached to certain infants in her care." "Overly attached?" Mark repeated, his voice tight. "What does that mean exactly?" "There were complaints from parents that she was holding their babies when it wasn't necessary for medical care. One family reported finding her in their room at 3 a.m., just standing over their baby's hospital bassinet. She claimed she was checking vital signs, but she wasn't assigned to that patient." Olivia felt sick. "And she was fired for this?" "Eventually, yes. There was an incident where she was caught trying to remove a baby from the maternity ward. She claimed she was just taking the infant for tests, but she had no authorization, and the tests she mentioned weren't scheduled. The hospital terminated her and reported the incident, but since the baby wasn't actually taken off the floor, there wasn't enough for criminal charges." "And you think she's now stalking our son?" Mark asked, his arm tightening around Olivia's shoulders. Detective Ramirez nodded gravely. "The timing fits. She was fired shortly before your son was born, but she would have had access to the hospital systems and records during her employment. She could have seen information about your son's condition." "But why Liam?" Olivia pressed. "There must have been dozens of babies born around that time." The detective hesitated. "This is speculation, but your son's medical issues might have been a factor. Ms. Whelan's personnel file shows that she lost a child of her own years ago, a baby boy who died from respiratory failure at 2 months old. The implications were clear and chilling. This woman, traumatized by the loss of her own child, had fixated on Liam, a baby with breathing issues similar to what her son had experienced. In her disturbed mind, perhaps she believed she could save him when she couldn't save her own child. "We're bringing her in for questioning," the detective assured them, "and we'll be increasing patrols in your neighborhood until we locate her." After Detective Ramirez left, Olivia and Mark sat in stunned silence. The mystery that had haunted them for months finally had a face, a name, a motive, however twisted it might be. There was something almost more terrifying about it now that it was real, now that they knew exactly who wanted to take their child. "We need to be extra careful," Mark said finally. "No leaving Liam with babysitters, no trips out unless absolutely necessary." Olivia nodded, her eyes drifting to where Rex lay in the living room, positioned so he could see both them and the front door. "Thank God for Rex," she whispered. "All those times he was staring out the window, growling at something we couldn't see. It was her. He knew." The days that followed were tense. Police were unable to locate Janet Whelan at her last known address. Her car had been found abandoned in a parking lot 20 miles away, suggesting she knew they were looking for her and had gone into hiding. Extra patrols circled their neighborhood, and friends brought groceries so they wouldn't have to leave the house with Liam. Patricia accelerated Rex's training, focusing heavily on protection behaviors, how to position himself between Liam and a stranger, how to alert Mark and Olivia to the presence of an intruder, how to respond if someone attempted to take Liam. "He's the best protection Liam could have," she told them during one session. "Dogs like Rex don't let their guard down. They don't get distracted. They don't fall asleep on the job." A week after the backyard sighting, Mark woke in the middle of the night to the sound of Rex barking frantically from Liam's room. It wasn't his usual alert bark. It was loud, urgent, filled with unmistakable alarm. He was out of bed instantly, Olivia right behind him as they raced to the nursery. The scene that greeted them would be burned into their memories forever. The nursery window was open, the screen removed, and standing over Liam's crib, reaching in to lift him, was a woman they had never seen before, but whose face they knew from the photograph Detective Ramirez had shown them. Janet Whelan. Rex stood between the crib and the intruder, his teeth bared, body coiled to attack. The only reason he hadn't lunged yet was his training. He had been taught to alert first, to give his owners a chance to handle the situation before he took more aggressive action. "Get away from my son," Mark said, his voice deadly calm, despite the terror and rage coursing through him. Janet turned, her expression eerily serene. "He's not safe here," she said, her voice gentle as if explaining something to a child. "He needs proper care, medical care. I can give him that." "Step away from the crib," Olivia said, her hand already on her phone, dialing 911. "The police are on their way." Janet's face hardened. "You don't understand. I'm trying to save him. I'm the only one who can." She moved suddenly, reaching again for Liam. It was the action Rex had been trained to prevent. In an instant, he was between her and the crib, teeth snapping at her outstretched arm. She jerked back with a cry of pain and outrage. "Call him off!" she demanded, clutching her arm where Rex's teeth had grazed the skin. "He's dangerous." "He's protecting our son," Mark said, stepping forward as Olivia completed the emergency call behind him. "And that's exactly what he's supposed to do." Janet's eyes darted from Mark to Rex, who stood unwavering, a solid wall of muscle and determination between her and Liam. For a moment, she seemed to realize the futility of her position. Then, with surprising speed, she turned and lunged for the open window. Rex was faster. He caught the hem of her coat in his teeth, pulling her back with enough force to send her sprawling onto the nursery floor. She cried out as she fell, more in frustration than pain. Mark was on her in an instant, pinning her arms behind her back while Olivia slammed the window shut, then lifted a now-crying Liam from his crib, backing away to the farthest corner of the room. The wait for the police seemed endless, though in reality it was less than 5 minutes. Throughout it all, Janet alternated between eerie calm and desperate pleas. "You don't understand," she kept saying. "I can take better care of him. I know what to watch for. I've done it before." "You've stolen babies before?" Mark asked, his grip on her wrists unwavering despite her struggles. She shook her head emphatically. "Not stolen, saved. They needed me." When the police finally arrived and took Janet into custody, both Mark and Olivia were shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline and fear. Detective Ramirez arrived shortly after, his face grim as officers led Janet to a waiting police car. In the weeks that followed Janet Whelan's arrest, a semblance of peace returned to their home. The investigation revealed the full extent of her obsession. She had been watching their home for months, keeping detailed notes about their comings and goings, monitoring Liam's development from a distance. A search of her apartment uncovered a nursery fully prepared for a baby boy, complete with medications for infant sleep apnea and a monitor identical to the one they used for Liam. She truly believed she was rescuing him, Detective Ramirez explained during one of his final visits. In her mind, she was the only one who could properly care for a baby with his condition because she had experienced losing a child to a similar issue. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, which found Janet unfit to stand trial. She was committed to a secure psychiatric facility where she would receive the treatment she desperately needed. The knowledge that she was getting help, rather than simply being punished, brought Olivia a measure of peace. The woman's actions had been terrifying, but they stemmed from unimaginable grief and mental illness. As the immediate danger passed, life settled into a new normal. Rex completed his service dog certification with flying colors. Patricia called him one of the most exceptional dogs she had ever trained, with natural abilities that couldn't be taught. Some dogs just have a sixth sense, she told them during their final training session. Rex is one of those rare ones who seems to know things before they happen. By the time Liam reached his first birthday, his episodes of sleep apnea had decreased significantly. The pediatrician was optimistic that he might soon outgrow the condition entirely. Still, Rex maintained his vigilant monitoring, sleeping beside Liam's crib every night, alert to the slightest change in his breathing. It was around this time that Mark and Olivia began discussing the possibility of sleep training Liam. He was still waking once or twice a night, and the pediatrician had suggested it might be time to help him learn to self-soothe and sleep through the night. "I don't know," Olivia said hesitantly as they discussed it over dinner one evening. "With his history of breathing issues, I'm nervous about not being right there if he needs us." Mark understood her concern. He had the same worries. "Doctor, Chen said his condition has improved so much that it's safe now, and we'll have the monitor on, of course." "And Rex," Olivia added, glancing at the German shepherd who lay nearby, ears perking up at the sound of his name. "He's never failed to alert us when something's wrong." That was true. Throughout Liam's first year, Rex had been unfailingly accurate in his alerts, often detecting the subtle changes in Liam's breathing or temperature before the electronic monitors did. They decided to try a modified approach to sleep training. Instead of letting Liam cry for extended periods, they would check on him at gradually increasing intervals. And of course, if Rex alerted them to any concerning changes, they would respond immediately, regardless of the sleep training schedule. The first night was difficult. Liam protested the new routine with impressive lung power, his wails carrying through the monitor, as Mark and Olivia sat tensely in the living room, watching the clock for when they could go comfort him again. Rex, however, didn't seem concerned by the crying. He stayed in the nursery, occasionally checking on Liam, but showing none of the alerting behaviors that would indicate a medical issue. His calm demeanor reassured them both that Liam was physically fine, even if he was emotionally displeased with the new arrangement. By the third night, the protests had lessened. Liam still fussed when put down, but he settled more quickly, and his night wakings were briefer. Rex maintained his position as guardian, dividing his time between the nursery and brief check-ins with Mark and Olivia, as if reporting that all was well. Then came the night that tested everything. It was the fifth night of sleep training. Liam had gone down more easily than before, with only token protests before drifting off. Mark and Olivia had enjoyed a rare evening to themselves, watching a movie and actually making it to the end without interruption. They went to bed feeling cautiously optimistic that the sleep training was working. Around 4 a.m., they were jolted awake by Rex's frantic barking, the specific urgent pattern he used to signal a medical alert. They were out of bed instantly, racing to the nursery. Liam was awake in his crib, making strange gasping sounds, his little face contorted with effort as he struggled to draw breath. Rex stood with his front paws on the edge of the crib, barking repeatedly to ensure they understood the urgency of the situation. "He's choking!" Olivia gasped, terror flooding her as she scooped Liam from the crib. "Mark, he's choking on something!" Mark's first aid training kicked in. He took Liam from Olivia's arms, positioned him face down along his forearm, and delivered firm blows between the baby's shoulder blades. Nothing happened. Liam's gasping grew weaker, his lips taking on a bluish tinge. "Call 911!" Mark shouted, continuing the back blows with increasing force. Olivia fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. Rex circled them anxiously, whining with distress. On the fifth blow, something dislodged. A small, hard object flew from Liam's mouth, bouncing onto the nursery floor. Instantly, Liam drew a huge, whooping breath, then began to cry. The most welcome sound his parents had ever heard. Rex immediately stopped barking. He sniffed at the object on the floor, a small button that had somehow come loose from one of Liam's stuffed animals, then turned his attention back to Liam, whining softly as he tried to lick the baby's dangling foot. The paramedics arrived minutes later, responding to Olivia's frantic call. They examined Liam thoroughly, confirming that his airway was now clear and his oxygen levels were returning to normal. The crisis had passed thanks to Mark's quick action and Rex's timely alert. "If your dog hadn't woken you," one of the paramedics said, letting the unfinished sentence hang in the air. They all knew what could have happened if Rex hadn't been there, if he hadn't sensed Liam's distress so quickly. That night, as they sat in the rocking chair with Liam sleeping peacefully in Olivia's arms, neither parent wanted to put him back in the crib. The thought of how close they had come to losing him was too raw, too terrifying. "We can't watch him every second," Mark said softly, voicing the fear they both felt. "Even with the monitors, even with us checking on him, if Rex hadn't been there tonight?" Olivia nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks as she stroked Liam's soft hair. "He saved him. Again." Rex sat at their feet, his head resting on Olivia's knee, his eyes never leaving Liam's face. The bond between the dog and baby had grown stronger with each passing month. Liam's first attempts at crawling had been toward Rex. His babbling often seemed directed at the patient dog who watched over him so devotedly. After the choking incident, they made an official decision. Rex wasn't just Liam's medical alert dog, he was his guardian angel, his protector in every sense. They formally registered him as Liam's service dog, complete with a custom vest that identified him as a medical alert and seizure response dog. With this certification, Rex would be legally permitted to accompany Liam anywhere, to daycare when Olivia returned to work, to doctor's appointments, eventually to school. "Some children have an imaginary friend," Olivia told her mother during a visit a few weeks later. "Liam has Rex. I'm not sure he even knows they're separate beings yet." It was true. At 14 months old, Liam's world revolved around Rex. He would call for the dog first thing every morning, his chubby hands reaching out from the crib as he babbled, "X!" exclamation mark, his approximation of Rex's name and one of his first recognizable words. Rex, for his part, seemed to understand his importance in Liam's life. Though no longer required to maintain the constant vigilance of those early months, he remained attuned to Liam's needs in an almost uncanny way. When Liam was learning to walk, Rex would position himself as a steady support, allowing the toddler to grab handfuls of fur to pull himself up and balance against the dog's solid frame. By Liam's second birthday, his sleep apnea had resolved completely. The pediatrician officially declared him outgrown of the condition that had caused so much fear in his first months of life. Mark and Olivia celebrated with a small party, complete with a dog-friendly cake for Rex, who they credited as much as any medical intervention for Liam's health and safety. "To Rex," Mark said, raising a glass of champagne as they stood in their backyard, watching Liam toddle after a butterfly with Rex following protectively behind. The best guardian angel a family could ask for. The years passed more peacefully after that. Janet Whelan remained in treatment, eventually being transferred to a less restrictive facility as her condition improved. She sent a letter once through her therapist, a sincere apology for the fear and pain she had caused, an explanation of how grief had warped her perception of reality. Olivia cried when she read it, feeling a complicated mix of forgiveness and lingering fear. Rex continued to be Liam's constant companion. As a certified service dog, he accompanied the boy everywhere, sitting patiently outside the bathroom door at daycare, lying quietly under the table during restaurant meals, watching attentively during playground visits. When Liam turned 5 and started kindergarten, there was initially some resistance from school administrators about having a dog in the classroom, but Rex's impeccable training and Liam's documented medical history eventually won them over. Rex became a beloved fixture at Sunshine Elementary, with teachers using him as an example of responsibility and service for the other children. On Liam's first day of school, Olivia snapped a picture that would become one of her favorites. 5-year-old Liam in his new backpack, standing proudly at the bus stop, with Rex sitting perfectly at attention beside him, both of them looking toward the future, with matching expressions of anticipation. "Are you nervous?" she had asked Liam that morning, as she adjusted his collar. Liam had shaken his head confidently. "Nope. Rex is coming with me." As if those simple words explained everything. And, in a way, they did. That afternoon, Olivia stood waiting at the bus stop, her heart in her throat as she watched for the yellow bus that would bring her son home from his first day of school. When it finally appeared and the doors opened, Liam bounded down the steps, his face split with a wide grin, Rex moving smoothly beside him. "Mom! Mom!" he called excitedly. "Guess what? Rex made everyone want to be my friend." She knelt to hug him, breathing in the scent of crayons and playground and little boy that clung to him. "Oh, really? How did he do that?" "Everyone wanted to know about him. And the teacher let me tell the whole class about how Rex is my special dog who keeps me safe. And Jimmy said he wishes he had a dog like Rex. And Sarah said Rex is the coolest dog ever. And..." As Liam chattered excitedly about his day, Olivia caught Rex's eye over the boy's shoulder. The German Shepherd's expression seemed almost proud as he stood patiently, waiting for Liam to finish his enthusiastic recap. Walking home, Liam skipped ahead a few steps, then turned back. "Come on, Rex! Race you to the corner!" Rex looked to Olivia for permission, ever the responsible guardian, then trotted forward to join Liam. Not racing, not running ahead, but staying perfectly in step with the boy's shorter stride, matching his pace to Liam's, as he had from the very beginning. Watching them, Olivia felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. From those terrifying first days when Rex had refused to leave the crib, to now, watching her confident kindergartner navigating the world with his beloved companion beside him. The journey had been nothing short of miraculous. "Some guardian angels don't have wings," she whispered to herself, echoing a phrase Mark had used years ago. "They have 4 paws and a heart full of love." Ahead of her, Liam laughed as he reached the corner, turning to wrap his arms around Rex's neck in a joyful hug. The dog's tail wagged gently, his posture relaxed but watchful, always watchful, as he accepted the boy's affection with dignified patience. They were more than pet and owner, more than service dog and charge. They were partners, protectors of each other, bound by a connection that had begun in those first moments of Liam's life and would continue, unbreakable, through all the adventures that lay ahead. A true miracle indeed,